Hello and welcome to another episode of Pakistonomy. Today I have the honor of having Junaid Iqbal join me for this discussion, and he needs no introduction. He was CEO and MD at Careem Pay. So Junaid, thank you for taking out the time. Really appreciate you joining us, and welcome to Pakistonomy.
Thank you so much, Uzair. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to our chat.
So I want to start with Careem and the story of Careem and his success, and the fact that it went from a startup, an idea, into a startup that was sold to Uber for over $3 billion, which is phenomenal. Also phenomenal because much of the leadership of the company comes from Pakistanis and Pakistani origin, and it really made a mark about the fact that Pakistanis also can scale up a startup and make their voice heard on a global scale. So I want to hear your thoughts in terms of that journey with Careem and what did it take to be so successful as a startup.
It's still very fresh, right? So me moving on from Kareem. So all the thoughts from the last 5 years are coming back. If I share the journey from how my journey started with Kareem, literally got a call from Monis Rahman one day, who is one of the earliest internet founders of Pakistan, internet entrepreneurs of Pakistan. And he said something to the effect, have you heard of Kareem? And I said, no. It's like, have you heard of Uber? I said, yes, I have used them in the US. So he said, Istra Mudassir Sheikha is the founder and CEO. He's a really nice guy. He's in Pakistan. He's recently raised some money as well, and he's looking for a Pakistan CEO. So we were introduced, we met, it was immediately we clicked. And I was fascinated by this person to begin with, how smart and successful this person was, and yet how humble he was. And the idea started flowing about Kareem, starting Kareem in Pakistan. And everyone he'd spoken to had pretty much said, okay, this can't happen. Like, no one's going to get into a car with a stranger in Pakistan. And frankly, that's what I said to him as well. and and to that, his response was, well, how do we change that? And I think some of our early conversations were about security or perception of security and how will we tackle that. And then that started a journey where we first launched in Lahore, which was a safer city, and we learned the ropes there. We built a really complex captain verification program. No program exists in Pakistan. You can't go to the government and have them vet a person for you. So we had to piece this together, some from government databases, some from other databases, and we had to hire a private agency to go and do due diligence on people. So we started on day one with that strong foundation. What really helped the growth journey of Careem, I think, not just in Pakistan but in other countries, was it was a very decentralized model. In every country, we found really good people who we could work with, who were really determined, very intelligent, very smart, willing to work very hard, and people of integrity, and people who would run through walls to solve problems. And I think that talent as it started to come in, started to solve the problems for each of the countries, and every country did have slightly different challenges. I think those started getting solved, and but for Pakistan, I feel the greatest excitement for the entire team was the job creation bit. And it became at least for me personally, it became an obsession. I remember having a chat with Mudassir in the early days, saying, man, what if we end up creating 10,000 jobs? That will be incredible. We'll feel like we've done something good in life. And Alhamdulillah, today, more than 500,000 captains are registered just in Pakistan. And if you look at the impact on the region, um, there were a lot of constituents for whom moving was very difficult, especially women, young women who wanted to be a more active part of the economic space, or to go study, or do whatever they have to do. I think they were the most hit, especially women in the middle income groups, because the buses weren't as friendly or as easily available, and private cars weren't as abundant to that group. And I think that's one group which was our first customer, which was our first advocate for the longest time. Women were larger part of our user base than men, and that is something we take a lot of pride in. And as this started to happen, this was the first such tech story. We got such amazing people joining us. I mean, for example, you would have a guy who just returned from studying at Duke, wanting to join Careem as a supply manager. And supply manager was one of the most exciting jobs, right? Because you cracked either supply acquisition or quality or retention or the bonus and guarantees and the financial bit of it. And at a very young age, you got real responsibility. You were making decisions and choices which would result in millions of dollars going here or there. And so here's a guy who's coming back from Duke and he's saying, I want to be a supply manager at Careem. And he's from Lahore, and we're saying, well, all the supply manager spots are already full. He's like, well, so where do you have these spots available? We're like, Faisalabad. He moved to Faisalabad. Wow. So guy just graduating from Duke, coming back to Pakistan, moving to Faisalabad. And so, and when you would ask them why, suddenly, the stories you heard, people had so much passion to do something for Pakistan. People were so purpose and mission driven. I think there were so many people who were just looking to do something good. And here was a company where they were learning about technology, they were learning about business, they were getting to do take decisions at a very young age. But most importantly, they were getting a chance to be a part of an economic and social transformation. And I think that was the secret sauce, that mission alignment, and how everyone brought their passion to the job and still do. Careem is it's a very different company. It's got that's why it has a very cultish feel to it as well, because people who come here come with very strong intentions. And I think one thing that our founders, Mudassir and Magnus, did very early in the day, Careem means generous, right? So they wanted to be generous to the captains, generous to the customers, and generous to our colleagues. And so from the beginning, we had a stock option program. So whoever joined us was not just an owner in their mind, they were a real owner. And I think that was another secret sauce. That's how it went. I'm sure we'll speak and write more about it in the future.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic, I've used the service every time I've been in Pakistan, and using that, talking to drivers and the captains in terms of their experiences. And I know it's cliche to talk about, I sat in a taxi and spoke to my taxi driver and have a view of the world or of the country. But the most interesting thing to me was every time I spoke to someone who was driving me was how empowered they felt about their own prospects, their financial prospects. They had access to social mobility. There were people who were, who went from earning 25,000 rupees a month in jobs that would not give them the mobility that they needed in their life, to driving for Careem and making 150,000 rupees a month and having control over, how much they wanted to work and having a stake in and the reward in terms of the hard work they were putting in. And to me, as a user, that was the most interesting bit about what Careem did, because in a Pakistani market, as far as I've seen, those opportunities for social mobility, particularly for those who are at the minimum wage level, are not there, or they're very limited in nature, right? And so offering that was, I think, the most phenomenal contribution. And the fact that you have over 500,000 captains in the country is just amazing. The one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of that journey was, what were one or two challenges that you encountered along the way in Pakistan that now when you look back on and say, okay, well, we didn't anticipate that, or either we didn't anticipate the scale of that problem, or we didn't anticipate that it would be solved in the way that you may have thought it would be solved when you were in the midst of that?
I mean, there were so many, and they kept changing. In the early days, we had to solve for safety and security, and every day we discover something new, and when we went ahead to solve it. Car ownership is very low in Pakistan. So when we launched this, it wasn't like the US where more than 800 out of 1,000 people own a car. In Pakistan, it's only 18 out of 1,000. So you didn't have people who owned a car and were willing to join your platform. There were people who wanted to join your platform and the people who owned a car. So we had to come up with a matching mechanism, which was fun because we ended up creating a Careempreneur program. These are people who owned cars, and then they partnered with a captain and they registered. So a vendor and a captain would come together.
Probably the first, I would say, probably the first at scale side hustle program in the country, I would say.
Yes, it was so much fun to see, all sorts of people, young people trying to do their first venture, people already in jobs, people in banks. Then another interesting thing we didn't realize we'd encounter was there was in the early days there was a social stigma around being like a driver. So it took a little bit of time for that captain pride to kick in. I'll tell you a story. So I would travel between Lahore and Islamabad, Karachi all the time, and Islamabad and Lahore. In Lahore, our office was close to in defense, and I used to take the 7 p.m. flight back often from Lahore. So I left my office at like 5:30, and I got into the car with this gentleman, really nice gentleman. He was a structural engineer, made I think 90,000 rupees. And I asked him, what's happening? He said, well, I have 3 kids. One is about to go to college. One is about to be like in 10th grade. So now I need more cash. So he was very happy. But he said, but I haven't, only my close friends know, and my side of the family knows. My in-laws don't know. I said, oh, and why not? He said, well, I don't want them to know. I've told my kids strictly, don't tell them. I said, okay. Sorry, at that time, only his close family knew. Only his close family knew. Anyways, 2 months or so later, I ran into him. Same situation, running for the 7 p.m. flight, running late as usual. Get into the car with the same gentleman. Of course, I recognize him. He recognizes me. We start having a chat again. I'm like, sir, but you had said last time that your in-laws don't know. He said, yes, I still haven't told them, but what has changed from last time is 3 of my best friends now know, and they've also joined, and now we all drive on the side with Careem, and we share notes. So I think that was something we did not see coming, that this would be a huge social stigma, but that stigma went away slowly, and then you'd run into people with degrees, people who are working with banks who'd say, I don't know, in the morning I go to Chandigarh Road, and then in the evening I have to go all the way to Gulistan-e-Johar. So it makes me money as well, and it's great. I meet interesting people as well, and later on, like, people started wearing that badge with a sense of pride. So I think those were challenges. And then when it came to the government, I never saw that as a challenge, so to speak, because somehow, even in the beginning, when we did get banned, it was because the machinery, the political machinery always wanted to support this, because for them it was like, wait, people are getting facilitated and jobs are getting created. So basically someone else is doing my job. Why should I come and doing this? In fact, I should help. So any politician we'd ever speak to on legislation, they would help. And I felt the bureaucracy also wanted to help, because everyone we met, they were using Careem, or their families were using Careem, but they were struggling on how to regulate this, what kind of laws to build. So that was an interesting challenge. So we had to then bring knowledge from other parts of the world, share with them, look, this is what India has done. This is the legislation the state of Massachusetts has passed. This is what's happening in Indonesia, or this is what Yandex did in Russia. And then we'd come up with recommendations that, given Pakistan where we are, and given the laws that already exist, how do we create a win-win? So that was a bit of a challenge in the beginning, but that also became a very interesting learning exercise for all of us. And KP was actually the first government to come out and facilitate not just ride-hailing, but online marketplaces. They reduced the income tax, sales tax rate. They came up with other schemes to help us, and then every province caught on.
I think that's like the incentive is there, right, for the government to cooperate, because if you're generating 500,000 jobs, formal jobs that are being paid formally, there is a flow of money going around, wealth is being created, that opens up taxation opportunities and reduces the informal side of
Yes.
the economy, right? So for the government, the incentive is, well, wait a minute, now I have 500,000 people working in these formal jobs who now maybe down the road have access to credit, who can take advantage of modern investment instruments, and the whole market grows around that. So to facilitate that, I would say is important and actually needed for a country like Pakistan, which struggles to formalize
Yes.
itself through the danda.
And I think KP government was very smart, and they had the benefit of having a minister who had just come back from McKinsey, Temur Chagra. So he said, "Look, this makes sense. I want more and more. I want more and more tech companies to come and lay their foundations in KP. So I'll come up with a reduced rate for sales tax on the platform, and we'll put sales tax on the captain, but at zero rating. That doesn't mean it's not there. It's just zero rated for now, which means the data starts getting collected, and slowly we will grow this. And actually, they were very smart. They took the numbers from BRT and other projects, and they said, here's our cost. Go back and do a comparison for us. If we were to invest in these projects and it were to serve X million people by the end of 5 years, versus that if we were to incentivize Careem and Uber and Baikia and Swivel and Airlift, and if they were to facilitate the same number of people, how much capex are we not spending? How many more people are getting served? How many jobs are getting created? And versus how much revenue are we getting? So the numbers were like so clear as light and day. Like job creation was like 70x. The financial numbers were so great, but they put good stipulations. They said, okay, your numbers good make sense on paper. We will do an audit every year. If you're really delivering, if platforms start delivering on what they're saying, then great. Then it's the government's job to look. If you look at Europe, I mean, public transport was built in Europe, what, like 100 years ago? So, like, or between 50 and 100 years ago, depending. I mean, imagine putting up a full railway structure within a city in this day and age at these real estate prices. It's hard. So, but I think I mean, if you're a pioneer, as Careem is in most countries, this kind of work the way we used to see it is like we're spending so much time and money on this and effort on this. This is a public good we're creating. It will be used. These are the railroads that other startups will use, and that's amazing.
Well, that's the other thing, right? I had Jamie Arbib, who co-authored this book called Rethinking Humanity. I had him on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we were talking about their hypothesis in terms of electric mobility, autonomous vehicles, food as a software, all these disruptive innovations that are just around the corner. And the one key thing he talked about, and we discussed at length, was that the old systems, the centralized systems of the industrial age will not work in the age that's around the corner, right? So similarly, laying a big trunk line of railways may have made sense 50 years ago, or having a BRT that is dedicated for a bus may have made sense 50 years ago. But doing that today, when you have EVs around the corner and AVs around the corner, is not the right investment. Yes, you need public transportation and you need to move people effectively, but you need to do it in a system that is forward looking versus backward looking, right? So if you can develop roads that are potentially 10 years down the line can be piloted for AVs, or if you start laying down the infrastructure for electric vehicles to reduce congestion or smog in your cities, then that's the investment I would say a city should be making, versus making a elevated pathway for buses that cost a lot more otherwise. Or if you do that, then along the feeder lines is where you do the investments that are more forward looking, right?
One sense that I got was, it's not that there is a lack of intention. Like there is good intent, right? Governments are making, whether it's Pakistan or Saudi or UAE, every country or Egypt, they're putting up infrastructure with the intention that it will enable economic activity and that it will create more jobs. Uh, a lot of governments may not be, the advice they may be getting may not be the best advice. That's the gap I noticed, that if you take good ideas to them, they will implement them. Look at Saudi Arabia. If you're talented and you're Saudi and you have worked for a McKinsey or a GE or anywhere, you are working with the Saudi government right now. They are a sponge for good talent, and they're letting that talent implement modern ideas so that they can leapfrog. That's what most economies in the region can do, especially Pakistan, where you have to build a system where you're open to advice. And if you open yourself, there are Pakistanis within Pakistan, there are Pakistanis around the world who will come and solve this for you. You have to create
Yeah.
that enabling environment.
So talking about leapfrog, it's a good segue to the question I had around Careem Pay and just in general around digital payments, was that it's something I wrote about a couple of weeks ago when I started my own newsletter looking at Pakistan and how it lags in 4G technology with the region, right? How it lags as a result of that, lags in digital payments, lags in maturity of digital ecosystem, etc. But the irony is Pakistan was the first country in the region to have a digital ID program with NADRA, and it just didn't build on it, right? Aadhaar in India came much later, but
Yeah.
because of Aadhaar, India is now far ahead. And I was curious to get your thought in terms of like, why is it that Pakistan has not been able to leapfrog, particularly in the payment space, where there is just so much potential for formalization, access to credit, equality of gender, right? Pakistan, I was looking at some data, like I think if you look at demographic data in Pakistan, women have less than half the rates of mobile phone ownerships compared to men in the country. So there is a big digital divide, but it hasn't been bridged, and it's holding the country back. And I was just curious to get your thoughts in terms of why that's the case and how does that change moving forward to really make sure that these innovations impact lives in a phenomenal way.
Look, I'm actually very, very excited and hopeful about Pakistan's digital payment infrastructure and ecosystem. And you have to give credit to the State Bank of Pakistan. It is a phenomenal organization. Now you imagine that it's a part of the government. It's a government organization, so it would be backward looking. The State Bank and its digital division is incredibly forward looking. They've come up with an e-money license regime. They are helping startups. Their doors are always open. They are so abreast with what's happening abroad. It's impressive. In fact, that there are some people in State Bank, when you go and speak to them, you realize, wow, man, this is the first time where you feel that the regulator seems to understand how this game will play out better. So I think it's a matter of time. What is starting to happen is underlying a lot of players have started building good products. I mean, you've got the Finjas of the world who already have a full EMI product ready, or Sada Pay who's building it. Then you have Careem, who's got a very large number of captains and customers, and as it becomes enabled in the payments ecosystem, just as a first step to solve for removing friction within its own ecosystem. Now, Careem not just has captains and customers, it's starting to do food deliveries, so it's got merchants.
I,
Can you
I
hear
was just
me?
going to say, yeah, I can hear you. I was just going to say that was I was going to, and sorry to interrupt on that, but you have 500,000
No worries.
captains with the recurring revenue, right? And so when you enable pay, all of a sudden within your ecosystem, the possibilities are immense in terms of the financial products you can offer to just within people who use your ecosystem.
Yes, so it's 500,000 registered, of course, a lot less active on a daily or weekly or a monthly basis. Yes, that. Now, if you look at the Careem customers, now digital penetration in the region is very low, right? The you would be shocked even in a place like UAE, which is probably most digitally advanced, and everyone has a bank account and a card. Yeah, maybe about half the users pay us for our services using digital means like debit or credit cards. In Pakistan, it's super anemic. It's less than It's in single digits, right? So the room to grow on the customer side, customers starting to use banking tools or starting to connect their bank accounts to digital wallets, that itself is a huge enabler. And once that happens, then being able to pay captains digitally so that they get instant payments, and then captains being able to not just withdraw that money or do payments to wherever they need to pay, but also be able to utilize a lot of the Careem services. Well, there's food, there's going to be in the super app world, more services are going to come. So the way I see Careem Pay has multiple chapters. Its first chapters, of course, is to solve for its own ecosystem and remove that friction, and then being able to provide the same services to a wider group of audience, and eventually morphing into a financial services platform. Of course, quite a few people will attempt to do this. There are banks who are going to try to become digital. There are digital first fintechs who are going to try to capture the market and do user acquisition. And then there are digital first super apps like Careem who already have multiple services and will add financial services and payments on top. So what I'm saying is that there are already a lot of companies who are building really good technology and infrastructure underneath the hood, and the State Bank is very progressive. They're gonna, I think they're gonna end up coming up with multiple licenses. There's an e-money license. They're gonna come up with smaller licenses too. And I think in less than 3 years, you would see the Pakistan payments ecosystem really going leaps and bounds ahead. That pent up pressure is there. There's some policy moves that are going to happen. There is some unlocking of capital flows that's going to happen. Right now, people are still, foreign investors are shy of investing in Pakistan only startups, because once you put money in, you can't then go out, you can't then open subsidies. So some of these rules will become clear, and I think you're going to see this explode.
Well, that's exciting, and I hope that the 3-year projection is on point or actually understated, because there is pent up demand, and I think it can do a phenomenal thing just in terms of overall macroeconomic stability in the country by catalyzing formalization and digitization, and social mobility, right? So all of a sudden, if you are the super app, and I think that is really the holy grail, and I want to hear your thoughts on what the challenges are to becoming that. But if you pull that off, then you have people transacting day in, day out with your app, and you can build credit scores, you can build risk profiles, and through that provide financial services, everything from micro pensions and micro investments and micro insurance to loans for your child's college education, right? Based on what kind of profile you have and the transaction data that's on the database. So, but super app is the holy grail. I was just curious to get your thoughts in terms of what are the challenges towards getting to that point from a Careem Pay perspective, or any other company that is trying to achieve that goal of becoming a super app.
I think generally speaking, today everybody wants to be a super app. That's the ambition. But you have to be good at some of your own core services. You have to be really good, and have some decent scale, and that's sort of your core. And then you keep building on top. I mean, in some ways you could say Amazon is a super seller in so many ways, right? It started with one line of items like books, and then it kept adding more and more things, and now it's doing Amazon Fresh, where it's getting into perishables and delivering them to your doorstep. And customers will trust you with more and more services, provided you're good at a few yourself. And if you're good at few yourself, then you can help bring others onto your platform who have built niche services which they are very good at delivering. And when they come onto your super app, you're able to give them discovery services, you're able to give them payment services, and last mile delivery or last mile fulfillment services. So for instance, if you already have the infrastructure of Careem, and there's some company which has really cracked laundry kind of on demand, then it makes sense for them to, instead of now them going out and doing this massive user acquisition drive, they can plug themselves into the Careem ecosystem, or any other super app. So I think people, you have to be good at the services that you offer. Just by offering many services won't make you a super app. I think with Careem, it's a very natural step into its journey. They've done ride hailing, done food, done delivery, built that customer trust across verticals. So a player like that is naturally more I would say is naturally more advantaged, if that makes sense.
No, I think, and the Amazon example is on point, right? I think I was looking at some data where it showed that I think 70 or 80% of American households have a recurring revenue relationship with Amazon through Prime. And that is
Yes.
fundamentally built on trust, right? That you as a customer initially joined it for 2-day Prime, but now it's a whole host of services. But
Yeah.
every single one of that is by far either leading or number two in its capabilities, right? So you as a customer know that if you order fresh from Amazon, or if you watch Amazon Video, or if you do whatever with Amazon as part of your relationship, that company will make sure your experience is top notch. And if you do too many things at the same time without making sure they're top notch, it's never going to, you're going to lose trust of your customer at the end of the day.
And it's conceivable. You might do really three products really well, and then you start onboarding new merchants, or you start building new microservices, and a customer has a poor experience in one of those services. And this may have been a very loyal customer who's using multiple services from you, and you may end up losing them because of that. So this is I mean, yeah, it's an interesting. It's going to be a very interesting space next couple of years.
Yeah. No, that's exciting. And before I transition over to sort of getting your advice for young people tuning in and what they should do, I know you're leaving Careem Pay. There's been a lot of media coverage and speculation about why and how and everything related to it. But just want to hear from the horse's mouth about why you're leaving, what's next for Junaid Iqbal, and just clear some of the air in terms of what the media has been talking about.
No, it's been a phenomenal journey, like 5 amazing years at Careem. I've had the opportunity to learn so much. We started Careem Pakistan from scratch, literally in a room with like 3, 4 people, a room we borrowed from Venture Dive, and then had the opportunity to lead Careem Saudi as well, and at a very interesting time, sort of between the end of 2017 to sort of early part of last year. This was one of the most socially and economically transformative time of Saudi Arabia, and then helping lay out the a lot of the foundations for Careem Pay. I just felt this was the right time for me to move on. It's been 5 amazing years, and this is nothing new in this part of the world. This might seem something new, but if you go to Asia, or if you go to the US, especially Silicon Valley, it's very normal that the sort of N-1 layer from early stages. For example, when I mean N, that's in Mudassir, me working with Mudassir from the very early stage, having worked at multiple businesses, it's very natural to then move on at some point and do your own thing. Uh, Careem is home to me. It's such a deep part of my identity. It's where I always feel that I always wanted to do something which was very meaningful, and finally, in Careem, I found that platform, and just all my energy, all my capacities became fully available to me. All my mental utilities became fully available to me, because it was everything we were doing was so soulful. Yes, it's a business. It's operationally intensive. It's digitally intensive. But at the same time, there is something very spiritual about it for me, and I felt that this was the right time for me to now move on and now take everything I've learned from Careem, and do the next thing.
Yeah,
Don't
and I
ask
think
me.
that's, I'm not going to ask you what the next thing is. We'll find
Yeah.
out soon enough. But
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that the point is important about the N-1 layer moving on, because that's how ecosystems mature and grow, right? The alumni of the leader go do their own thing or join something else, and everything else rises on top of that. And it's something that many startups and other companies like a McKinsey are proud of, right? That they bring in top talent, they train them, equip them, let them grow, and then let them go to the next thing so that they can do what they want to do and succeed outside of the parent organization as well. And I think I wish you all the best in your
Thank
journey and
you.
what's looking
Thank you.
forward to that. I want to, in the last few minutes of this discussion, talk a bit about if someone who's young coming out of undergrad or is in undergrad looking to start either their own venture or joining a hyper growth startup. Careem is no longer, it's sort of the granddaddy in that sense, but maybe even a Careem. What does it take for someone to succeed either in launching their own venture, or what is your advice to someone young who is hungry for success and wants to be part of something as revolutionary as a Careem?
So I think Kareem is still in a very interesting and exciting stage because uh, while ride hailing may have become big, it's still early, right? I mean, the entire transport segment is still very huge in the region, and plus with Super App, every year, every couple of quarters, a new business line will keep getting added. So for young people, it is still a very exciting place to be at. I think the most important thing to solve for when you are young is learning. Which company or which venture will give you the most opportunity to learn and grow? One mistake I've often seen young people make is right out of college or something, or they start a startup and they're already talking about valuations. I mean, nobody cares. Like, trust me, and nobody at Careem spoke about valuations ever. Nobody spoke about exits. Everyone had just put their head down, and we were just working. We were working on whatever we were supposed to work on. It's a large team spread across so many countries, all the way from Cairo to Karachi. Everyone was just waking up every day and solving what they had to solve for. And then at some point, the sum of parts became really interesting and exciting, and other people started becoming really excited to be a part of this journey. Other people wanted in, and eventually this deal happened too. So my pieces of I would give three pieces of advice. One, whether you're joining something or you're building something of your own, one is focus on learning. B, do not think about valuations and exits. Focus on building a really good business or solving a problem. And the bigger the problem is, the more complex the problem is, the better chance of success you have. And this is kind of intuitive because if a space looks problematic and you look at it from a distance, you're like, yeah, it's too complicated, right? It's too hard. But that's where the value is hidden. I mean, everyone can grow potatoes and tomatoes and onions, right? Mining is hard. Mining is complex. Like, you need technology, you need grit, you'll get, or drilling is hard because some drills won't result in you discovering oil or whatnot. But that is where value is hidden. And as an entrepreneur or as a professional, if you are someone who's doing jobs which are hard, you will become more wanted over a period of time, because you would have developed grit, you would have developed problem solving capabilities. And the third point is, and surround yourself by good people. If you're joining a company, make sure you're getting inspired by the people you're meeting in your interview process. If you're building a company, make sure you're bringing on board other people who you think will inspire you, who are values driven, who align with you, and who you feel you can learn from, and uh, who will be really determined to solve problems. So I think these would be the three big things that immediately come to my mind.
That's interesting, and let me follow up with a question on that as well. Now, when you look back at like 5 years ago when you began your journey at Careem, is there something you would tell your own self 5 years ago to do differently, if anything?
No, I feel so blessed. I feel so honored. I feel so lucky um, that this opportunity came up, and of course, Careem was a small company at that time. They hadn't started in Pakistan. Even in Dubai, it was based out of a small office. They'd raised some money, but they hadn't done the big rounds of funding. Um, if you look at it, I had three reasons for joining. When I bought it, and I mean, we'd had the conversations. I met Mudassir, I met Magnus, I met Abdullah, I met some of the board members. I even went and attended some meetings at Careem to get a feel in Dubai to get a feel. And interestingly, my brother knew about this. He's in tech, and he knew some people who knew Mudassir as well. He was very supportive. But before I made a decision, three things crystallized. Sorry, three things crystallized in my mind. One was that, man, they're very good people. They seem to be really smart and yet so humble. Like this is rare. And I was coming from financial services, so it's a little rare combination.
That's a shocker for you.
It's a shocker. I mean, wait, like these guys are really, really smart and they've already done good stuff, but why they're really nice too. So that was one. The second was that this will be a free MBA in the new world economy. I had worked in energy, media, and finance. Pretty like industries which existed 100 years ago as well. I was like, well, I'm going to get to learn so much. I don't know anything about apps and stuff. And in fact, if you ask some of the leadership at Careem, that this was their biggest fear when they were bringing me on board, that this guy knows nothing about tech. Like he's like a finance guy. He wears like suits with the pocket squares. Like how the hell will he fit in? And to me, that was the exciting bit. I'm like, wow, man, I have a blank slate. I don't know anything about this space. I'll have to learn every day on the job. And the third thing was, man, wow, what if we can create 10,000 jobs in Pakistan? So now that I look back, Alhamdulillah, these seem to be the right. This seemed to be the right choice, and it's been amazing. It's been amazing. What a ride, Alhamdulillah.
Well, that's fantastic. And before I let you go, what are 2 or 3 interesting books that you recently read that you would recommend people pick up and have a look at?
I recently read Principles by Ray Dalio. I found that it can be a little prescriptive, but I found it to be very, very interesting. And I also read the biography of the Disney CEO recently, and I thought that it had some of the. I mean, I would compare it to Sam Walton's Made in America, which is another favorite book, because when you're growing a business, a lot of leaders, they write about big picture, overarching, all encapsulating stuff, but these books really get into the details, which are really useful.
Well, I Principles is on my list. I haven't read the other 2, so I'll definitely add those to my list as well. But Junaid, thank you so much.
One more, and I read Alchemist for the 3rd time. Okay. The Alchemist.
That's a great read. Yeah, that's always a fun read. Thank you so much for taking out the time. This was a pleasure and a great conversation, and wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and we'll be in touch. And to all the listeners, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Facebook, etc. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Uzair. Goodbye.